This was the last talk I prepared on Monday just before leaving, so my apologies right at the very beginning. It is not 100% up to the mark. But yes, I have been searching last 1 month about articles. When I read every day, I keep reading what is the best article. And to my mind, I'm going to restrict to articles in cardiac anesthesia practice in recent times. And not because if you cover up the past, we can go on and on. So taking up from where Satyajit left and how evidence can influence clinical practice, we all need to update the evidence. We all need to keep, as I said, appraising the evidence. We need to develop guidance from the guidelines and disseminate this guidance amongst our juniors. Not just the junior doctors, but the juniors in the entire team. Let's say if we are working for ECMO, it's not enough that the person who's putting the cannulas and the person who's doing the echo or the intensivist who's looking at the sepsis part, you leave out the nurses or the perfusionists. How much is my RPM run? How much is my ACT on the heparin infusion? Do I need to, these days the new guidelines say, because of the heparin coated circuits coming in, you don't need a heparin infusion. But does my perfusionist know that heparin infusion is needed or not? And what is the ACT and what is the ROTEM measure of the FIPTEM for that ACT? So, meaning to say the platelet function. But in that process, do we neglect the nurse? So those are guideline appraisal of the entire team that we are talking of, which make the evidence-based medicine come more fruitful for any particular cause that we are doing it. So improved clinical outcomes will only come when we have these appraised guidelines. So the aim of evidence-based health is to provide the means by which the current best evidence from research can be judiciously and conscientiously applied to the prevention, detection, and care of health disorders. This aim is decidedly ambitious. When you take on and bring on a change, everyone is very hesitant to adopt a change. If tomorrow I go and say I don't need heparin infusion for my ECMO patient, believe me, 20 people will resist me. If I say apps, I was resisted at last 3 years as an editor. Why? Because they have not seen the beautiful apps and the way the journal opens up with these apps on your mobile phone. So if you are with that, you need to adapt to the new technology, you need to adapt to the newness, but do not adapt blindly. So those are things that need to be slowly moved into the system, and these slowly moving in should also be very certainly seen that you are not withdrawing from the system what was judiciously good. So some of the journal I've been most fond of in the last 1 year has been PLOS Medicine. Maybe I've done a DNB medicine and I'm a physician at heart, but somehow that gluing more from NEGM or Lancet onto PLOS Medicine. Why? Because it gives you a very beautiful citation of everything. This has been my aim for ACA, of the number of articles viewed, shared, cited, and saved by most. But when you have citation classics in systematic reviews and meta-analysis, it is important to know as an editor who has written the top 100 cited articles or the top 10 cited articles maybe in a society of our size. So that was my aim for this lecture, and it has been seen that since the late 1970s, it is not India, but USA, UK and Canada which have taken leadership in the production of citation classic papers. No first author from a low or middle income country led one of the most cited 100 articles, and that is where I feel the need amongst the youngsters to rise up. Believe me, maybe I can speak, I've done it, but if you do a very carefully crafted research and you put your original article and then based on that original article a few letters to editors or a case report in different journals, that's where your small research got into clinical practice, spreads all around, and that's what gives you citations. It's not difficult to do. What is needed is the need to do it in your mind first, and the focusing with your daily practice, that come what may, come the resistance from the administrators, you have to do it. So keeping that in mind, when we say the classic citations, we look towards America, and I want to ask as an Indian editor, why do I need to just cite English or American citations? Why can't we, as a big nation, so populous, so big in numbers in terms of so many people, if there are 15,000 cardiac anesthetists in USA, You too have 1500. But out of these 1500, how many are able or capable of giving cited articles is what I want to reach out to each one of you. Each one has the potential. We think of negative things. We want to down people who are doing it. Please be with the people who can do, form a team, go ahead in your local practice and do it. No one is bigger or better. Your research says it all. And that's where, when you don't see India on the map of the best cited articles, that you feel sorry as an editor. And that's what the take-home message, at least of the few sitting here, should be when you go home. Think of an article, think of a research, and try to put it into practice. Coming on to the best research articles that made an impact, JCVA is our mentor, and the journal I have been looking at too as an editor in the last, and before an editor, in the last 20 years of my cardiac anesthesia practice. If I look at JCVA and anything come on JCVA, you tend to copy blindly. But then when you scrutinize from an evidence-based point of view, as a discriminatory editor, everything there is also not hunky-dory. Everything is not 100%. So non-invasive cardiac output is the thing. This article of JCVA as a review, this article was written in the year 2008 and 13. And this article fetched a lot of citations. It was the article that brought about the demise of the PA catheter to a large extent. There was a moratorium on the PA catheter by Connor's study in critical care medicine. And following 2007 to 2010, the use of PA catheters and the modifications of these PA catheters was being done away with. When that stage was reached as to how to adopt, because validation of non-invasive cardiac output monitoring was not very, very good. And this validation, when it came in with the flow track, it became better with the esophageal Doppler coming into, and so many other forms, and the PICO technology coming into vogue, that non-invasive ventilation being bought in the ICU and every OR became one of the needs in the Western world. And we also in India closely adopted it. So these are articles that make and break your clinical practice. And I felt reading this article, reading Leila Matthews' article, which I'm going to quote from ACA, are articles which made a difference into our practice. I could say from AIIMS, we do not use PA catheters. Maybe we do use PA catheters in only severe LV dysfunction, or probably for research methodology. But otherwise, our dependence more and more on non-invasive methods on TE was something that brought about a change, and you need articles like this that bring about a change. A very, very well-referred article and well done. The article that also brought about a big change was the Rivers article on early goal-directed therapy in the treatment of severe sepsis and septic shock. This article made us change the emergency department, the ICU, as well as for people like us in the perioperative period, we adopted the concept of goal-directed therapy. Goal-directed therapy not just for hemodynamic monitoring, but for coagulation monitoring, for all kinds of X-ray dealings. And I was talking to a group of radiologists. They follow goal-directed therapy in sending their patients, whether for a CT angio or an MRI or a CT scan, they are also developing those principles of goal-directed therapy. So when you think of time and you don't want to lose the golden hour, that is what Rivers said, and you want to do everything in those first few hours, these kind of papers help you modulate your practice, and these kind of papers help you draft and do what you have to do. So Emmanuel Rivers' early goal-directed therapy, to my mind, I may be wrong. I've chosen those which I thought were most cited, most read, and as a clinician of 20 years of practice in cardiac anesthesia, most adopted into clinical practice. A comparison of the different drugs for anesthesia and cardiac surgical patients. Now this article of BJA articles are very well read and cited by the Almetric data which is available for these articles. And this is how you grow. This Almetric data is through an app. And you can't have it if you don't have an app on your journal. And this is how the face of the journal, the visibility, the article citations, everything grows if you are seen well, even by a person who's sitting in Hong Kong in a hotel room and trying to read your article on his mobile. So this article of BJA, which was published by Lyons et al., was comparing different drugs for anesthesia, and they gave that some of the drugs are redundant, some of the drugs coming up were good. They replaced the usage of etomidate. This article is a big article to read, but if you go through the kind of drugs that they said and talked about was a great one. We've all been studying in physiology about oxygen delivery and its role with hemoglobin. The use of fluorocarbons, the use perfluorocarbons as an alternative to blood transfusion was something that has been done, but we did not use it into our practice. Oxygen delivery and the revival of maintaining a good hematocrit and a hemoglobin above 9.5 is the article by McLellan et al. In this BJA has probably one of the few best cited articles amongst the anesthesia journals for a cardiac content or a general content which could be adopted for the for citation into clinical practice, and that because of the way it has been growing over the years. Now this article said that oxygen must be transported effectively from the atmosphere. It told us about being in an oxygenated area being so important to the tissues in order to maintain the normal metabolism, and understanding of oxygen delivery is therefore central to the management of patients during anesthesia, resuscitation, and during critical illness. This review deals specifically with the transport of oxygen from the lungs to the non-pulmonary tissues and how it gets absorbed, how it is a carrier with hemoglobin, and how the distribution of hemoglobin happens, and once this is happening, how are drugs affected. So maintaining the hematocrit, maintaining oxygen delivery to the right way in the non-pulmonary tissues is what this article was about, and from 2004 onwards our hematocrit practice changed. Coming to ACA, we are very, very happy, as I said yesterday in the GBM, that probably the most cited articles worldwide have been on transfusion. Sepsis and transfusion have formed, beyond hemodynamic monitoring, the best few cited articles which have changed our practice. And probably transfusion medicine, transfusion journal are the BTS guidelines that come in very, very frequently and are adopted, are those kind of articles which give you a lot of hits. As Deepak was saying, there is always a controversy, liberal or restricted, what kind of blood transfusion to give. Satyajit also laid emphasis on it. So Bharti Scott's article from ACA in 2008, which has gained us the maximum citations. Now citations are different from PDF downloads, they're different from the amount of reviews being done. Unfortunately, without the apps, this is what only the editor can see, these citations. But the moment you have the apps like PLOS Medicine, you will be able to see your own article that you've done with how many downloads and view, and transparency would be more. So in Bharti Scott's article, the data has shown that patients who received transfusion had significantly longer time to extubation, ICU length of stay, and length of stay in the ward. They also had significantly higher incidence of mortality, and they said that the length of stay increased with the number of units of the RBCs transfused. So this was a big no-no on transfusion by Bharti Scott, and in 2008 it was a very pertinent article from the Indian scenario to come in, and at that time only the other articles worldwide were coming in. So we follow the West. I wish we are tomorrow, 10 years later, in a population where people follow us. People can follow us for yoga. So that is the bane of people like Shivananda and big people like even Ramdev today, who have given yoga here in India as a meditative forum, as a literary scientific forum for the West to adopt. Why can't we as cardiac anesthesiologists be leaders and not follow them, but have for our own local population something similar? So that was the reason why I quoted more and more of ACA and less of the Western journals. Cardiac output monitoring, again at a time in 2008, probably the best period of ACA has been in 2008. We start getting citations, the best form, 10 years from when we cite it here in India. But if you see the Western world, we get citations within a year of citing it. And reason, my friends, is because we don't have visibility. I do not know what Hema is publishing or what Dr. Vishwas is publishing unless or until I have it on my app. and unless or until I see the publications more. So we don't have visibility, we try to hide, we are not aware, we are ignorant. That hesitancy and that knowledge inhibition has to go from our minds, and we must invest in technology. You may not invest in food, we need less of food as we age, but you must invest in technology is what I would feel as an editor as I finish my editorship. So Leila Matthew had made a very good conclusion that no single method stands out or renders the others as obsolete for any non-invasive cardiac output monitoring. By making cardiac output easily measurable, these techniques should all contribute to improvement in hemodynamic management. She had talked about a plethora of non-invasive ventilation strategies, and when she was talking of that non-ventilation strategies, she said it is not the time in 2008 to say a big bye to the PA catheter. You should continue using the PA catheter to your very best. So this article, I don't want to boast, it has given me a confidence of being in an OR with at least one cardiac output monitoring there. And this article I didn't think would fetch me so much, but we took on an ICMR project and we have 3 successive articles in 2015-16 with biomarkers and in off-pump and on-pump surgery. And we did observe, like River study, that only a few benefits of decreased length of stay and decreased inotropic requirement, but goal-directed therapy here in hemodynamic monitoring for us as cardiac anesthesiologists are here to stay. We are very, very apprehensive of using inhalational anesthetics. But if you see recent literature, what is coming up is, and these are articles by Landani, one man alone, if you punch halogenated inhalational anesthetics, the name that comes up to the forefront is the research done by one man, Giovanni Landani. I want to salute him because he has made sure that over TIVA, inhalational anesthetics are used by most anesthetists, at least in Italy and his part of the world, and cardiac protection, preconditioning, post-conditioning, those are clinical practices which we are so again inhibited and hesitant to use because we feel it's not needed. But believe me, if you have a sevoflurane with a MAC of 8% in a child and then coming down to a MAC of 0.8 to 1% and the patient waking up faster with less ICU stay, isn't an inhalational anesthetic better than an intravenous fentanyl midazolam in the body, which will undergo the renal and the liver metabolism to be excreted out? So why have a hazy patient when you can have a more awake patient with the use of Sevo or desflurane, which not only give you a decreased length of stay, but during your cross clamping, whatever preconditioning, ischemic or chemical, that you do with the inhalational agent is far superior to what you do with a propofol or a fentanyl. So I too believe, after reading his articles, and I have written and tried to practice desflurane and cardiac anesthesia to the utmost, and I feel inhalational anesthetics, yesterday Dr. Rajiv told us the same, that the future of a cardiac anesthesiologist lies into more and more confidence and liberal use of inhalational agents, and people like Giovanni Landani and his papers in journals like ACA, in JCVA and so many others should also be read and imbibed into clinical practice. Now, comparison of simultaneous estimation of cardiac output by 4 techniques in patients undergoing off-pump CABG, article done by Murli Chakravarti. I don't think so. The Indian subcontinent should not bow down and salute this man. His work on regional cardiac anesthesia, the use of thoracic epidurals, the use of cardiac output and hemodynamic monitoring has changed the entire scenario and made us use thoracic epidural and cardiac output monitoring to the hilt. So this article was very well seen and has given us good citations. Comparison of continuous thoracic epidural and paravertebral block. If you see, it came on in the same time, 2007-8, are the periods when we had the maximum. A paper by Dr. Yatin Mehta et al. On robotic assisted coronary bypass surgery. Very few centers do robotics, but thoracic epidural in robotics was a very daring attempt at that time, and that was the era when minimally invasive surgery with robotic cardiac surgery was beginning. And today, if you see a TAVI happening in a hybrid suite, don't forget, these are the papers which help you make a difference. Extracorporeal membrane oxygenation and anesthesiologist perspective. The stethoscope of an ICU tomorrow. Swaroop Margale has made a very nice entry at the right time with ECMO being talked about as the best paper. We had a lovely workshop here on ECMO the other day, and ECMO has made a change, and papers and literature on ECMO for the first time from the Indian subcontinent by Dr. Sandeep Chauhan, my senior. He is the man who's changed with his ECMO practice, and all of us learning in the confines of the corridors of ECMO. I'll just take 1 or 2 more minutes. About the ECMO being used at the right time in the most reversible of pathologies on patients to give you a better cardiac output, whether a VV or a veno-arterial, ECMO is here to stay in every ICU. So these papers make or break you, and these papers from the Indian subcontinent should be read. I have colleagues with me who says Indian textbooks are a big no-no. There are people who say Indian journals are not indexed. But if you read a JCVA 3 times and you read 1 article of ACA, that's where, or IJA or JOACP, that's where your patriotism and your learning on the local population and the local things happens. So human factors in the operating room, the surgeon's perspective, is an article which has come up as a very trending article with trends in anesthesia critical care, a new journal by Elsevier, again making changes and getting good citations. Human factors in the operating room help improve and decrease outcomes is what this article's view is, and this is from a surgeon's perspective, very well read and very well taken. Some biomedical papers in the era of biogenomics and biochemical markers. In 2013, real 3-dimensional TE, a make and break paper on TE. We could go on and on about ACE guidelines from circulation in 2013 and earlier. About TE coming in, those are some papers that made a benefit, but this paper most cited was on 3D TE, and this paper from biomedical papers has made a big change. The surviving sepsis guidelines in the ICU has brought about a continuous move towards better care of patients with sepsis in the ICU, absolutely 100% followed, and the reason being that the screening for sepsis and performance improvement potentially in these infected seriously ill patients for severe sepsis to allow better implementation of therapy is very beautiful written. It is well validated, the stats are perfect, and to the reader it gives a complete sense as to how to adopt these guidelines into your practice. ECMO, as I was saying, by George Makdisi, is another from the Journal of Thoracic Diseases, and this review is fetching good citations. So, as I said, this should be a take-home message that barriers and bridges to evidence-based clinical practice will continue. The aim of evidence-based practice is to integrate current best evidence from research with clinical policy and practice. And this can only be got by one way. Read, read, and read. Make eating and reading your daily practice. Read from wherever you get it, on your phone, on your iPad, on the go, anywhere. But when you keep reading, your mind is not functioning towards Alzheimer's. It is not thinking negative. You are a positive creator, and at the end of the day, as a cardiac anesthesiologist, it is helping you better your own practice. So the moment, and a teamwork happens. When you are reading more, another person you are, as a senior in the team, imbibing to read more. He or she would be encouraged by your reading to go back and read. Tomorrow when you have 5 reading people in the OR, you would be framing guidelines of your own very soon for your own OR. So that is the research-based practice that every clinical paper should make you do at the end, help you better your outcomes, and progress is slow in creating evidence-based clinical policies and ensuring that evidence and policy are applied at the right time. So the time to read is now, and the time to read for Indian cardiac anesthesiologists and publish the data in Indian journals as well as American journals is now. So we've been reading and writing at AIIMS. You cannot progress to the next. I do believe that there has to be certain set limitations of your research work before you get your next promotion. It happens in AIIMS, and that's why we are what we are, a developing institute. We learn, we may be erring, we may be political, but at the end of the day, we are academic and research based. So we could produce this as a team from AIIMS and IACTA. I personally feel it's because of reading. So clinical research should be on. Thank you.